It's spelled traitor, not traitor. My jack of all trades. Chapter 15. Outplayed. Izuku stared at the empty vial of quirk suppressant. All of the heroes were silent, and he panned his view back to Nezu, who continued to smile innocently. The silence was shattered as Bakugo in the back began screaming in confusion, having to be held back by Kirishima and Tetsu so that he could not interrupt the delicate balance of the negotiations. The stalemate was broken when Izuku's cheeks puffed out. He smirked in a poorly concealed laugh. It was not enough, and Izuku decided to just roll with it. The chuckle evolved quickly into a full-bodied laughter. He had to support his head in one hand because his body was too focused on laughing to hold his neck up. The heroes waited patiently for the hysterics to pass, and eventually Izuku threw his hands up to rest behind his head and leaned back. Oh man, I got outplayed hard! The gathered viewers were astonished at just how brightly Izuku's face lit up when he smiled. A real true grin of pure amusement, as opposed to the put-on smirks and lopsided grimaces he had shown before. Well, you essentially got me neutered for the next 5-10 minutes. As I'm not currently being mobbed and restrained, this wasn't an ambush sneak attack opportunity.
Indeed not.
Nezu nodded.
Merely a precaution so that you would not disappear again after we've put so much work into arranging a meeting with you.
Fair. I probably would have popped out from reflex at the name drop you just pulled. If you don't mind, I'd like to know what tipped you off.
We won't lie. We had all but cleared your alias until Toga Himiko came to visit you.
All Might began, hands steepled on tea table.
Several discrepancies appeared in your testimony afterward. The first that you gave was saying that you smelled blood from the Uraraka poser. None of the people who interacted with her reported that, but Detective Tsukauchi confirmed that what you were saying was the truth. Therefore, to smell that, you'd need an exceptionally powerful sense of smell. As you said, that give and take can only deal in intangible effects. It was agreed you must have a scenting quirk.
Tsukauchi also noted another oddity.
Nezu offered.
When dusting for prints and such, he found that there was only one set of tracks leading out of the room. Something must have happened in the room that necessitated you to sanitize it before she left. Another extra quirk indication.
That was enough to cast suspicion on Midori, but the final confirmation was when I confronted you in the prison. Mirio had dropped the scowl he had held so far to reveal a bright smile. I recognized you from when I intervened in a robbery at Midori's counseling office, before you had altered yourself to the image that Midori now holds. Ah! Izuku covered his eyes with an arm. I knew there was something I was missing. No, he didn't. He had completely forgotten. I guess it was too much to bank on hoping you'd have forgotten.
Investigators compared the faces of Izuku and Midori and determined that it was not a disguise, no makeup or style changes, which meant that you had used the quirk to physically alter your appearance. You put on a physical mask to imitate the psychological masks that you wear, because, yes, we did notice those.
As you chuckled,
you admonished Lemillion for not watching the security feeds, but we had. We noticed the drastic changes in your demeanor and speech between when you addressed Alpha 1, when the heroes arrived, and when Lemillion confronted you. Even now you have given way from your persona as nobody to revert to some iteration of Midoriya Izuku.
I found it was easier to manipulate people if I showed them what they wanted to see and told them what they wanted to hear. Izuku shrugged. I guess it evolved a bit further than I had anticipated if the difference was so noticeable.
Indeed. I'm sure your next question is to ask why you have not been arrested immediately, aside from what we have already mentioned, your willingness to cooperate and your aid in taking down the villains. We feel your actions as Midori have been counter to what a villain would want.
I know All for One, and as his protege I assume he'd passed his tendencies on to you.
All Might tapped his thumbs together.
All for One preferred to plan for the long game. Every fight, every crime was aimed at a higher goal further down the line. And yet the way you have helped the students of UA with their issues and the vehemence with which you reacted to them lack of school counseling ultimately will result in heroes that are stronger and less susceptible to manipulation.
Maybe, but my actions have caused Endeavor to be absent from this encounter.
Izuku pointed out. That made it easier to allow every villain to be taken alive and with a minimum of injury. I'm sure Endeavor would have advocated burning the hotel down around the villains. Still, a short-term boon in exchange for severe hardship in the future, and one that supported the efforts to bring criminals to justice. Not the ideal operation for someone who plans to continue illegal activities in the future. Nezu put a paw to the side of his mouth to pantomime whispering, despite talking at his normal volume. To tell you the truth, I've been looking for an excuse to restructure that department for years. All eyes suddenly swiveled to the man, bear, mouse, dog, principal.
But, Principal Nezu, if you felt that way, why didn't you just do it?
All Might asked, confused. Well, it all has its roots in my tragic backstory. Nezu cut a theatrical swoon. You see, Midoriya, I am not a highly intelligent and charismatic human with an animal form quirk. I am one of the few cases of an animal with a quirk. In this case, high spec, which grants me superintelligence. Early in my life, I was in the care of some humans who enjoyed performing tests upon me that did not live up to scientific standards. Nezu pawed at the scar over his right eye. When they were busted by heroes, I was taken to UA for monitoring to ensure that I would not use my intelligence for villainy. Over time, I became the school's mascot, then a teacher, and eventually was granted the position of principal. As someone with severe trauma and preternatural intelligence, I was disgusted by the lack of professionalism in the counseling department. However, as UA students may know, I do still harbor some vindictive feelings for humans. Nezu admitted. I must confess to feeling an emotional high from having complete control over a group of humans, subjecting them to experimentation, the likes of which I once went through. Which is why I take a great thrill in ensuring that UA's tests and events are as sadistic as they are, all in the name of pushing our students to go beyond their limits. I knew it was sadism! One student shouted. But it is that tendency that held me back from making the reforms. Nezu continued over the outburst. If I were to alter what the public thinks is a perfectly serviceable facet of UA, they would think that I had finally gone mad with power and was sabotaging the students. That the animal had finally gone feral. But you, Midoriya, you stormed into my office full of righteous fury and handed me the impetus and evidence I needed to push through new standards.
Ah, that's our principal for ya! Mirio grinned. Contingencies on top of backup plans, on top of ulterior motives.
Honestly, the hardest part of our deception was playing dumb for you, Midoriya. Nezu giggled. It was interesting trying to pretend to be of mere average intelligence and blatant obliviousness to the state of my school.
That was definitely my least favorite part of this plan. Mirio nodded seriously. Acting as the cliche dumb muzzle to throw you off suspicion. A hero was supposed to be a source of inspiration and hope. That's a muscle-bound knucklehead. An awkward cough was heard from Death Fist. So then, this works out for everyone. Izuku clapped his hands together. UA gets its reforms, the Villains Alliance is gone, and I get to keep doing what I love to do, assuming that the community service you mentioned earlier was to continue giving quirk counseling. It's a win-win-win. Except for the villains, but they gave up their right to a happy ending when they started killing people, so nobody cares about them. About that, young Midoriya. All Might leaned forward. I was curious, but there was never a good time to ask. You run a quirk counseling office, and yet your sign reads, Quirkless Welcome. Why is that? Well, I suppose it is time I revealed my master plan to you all. Izuku began with an ominous chuckle. Have you wondered why the text on the top and bottom lines of the sign are centered, but counseling is oddly indented? Well, I used an obfuscation quirk to hide that the full line reads, Counseling and Trades. Izuku spread his arms melodramatically. That's right. People would come to me, and if they could prove that their quirk was unfit for them, or was traumatizing children, I would take it from them, and in return I would grant them quirks suitable for their ambitions. And when the Quirkless would come to me, I would grant them their own quirk, so that they could present as a late bloomer. My masterful evil scheme to support the public. Mwahaha! Izuku paused his deadpan laugh and put a finger on his chin. That reminds me, I need to give Ragdoll her quirk back. Search? Ah,
So that's how you dodge my hidden punch from below. Mirio clapped a fist to his open hand. Yes, indeed, and you couldn't have timed it any better. Izuku applauded. Why, thank you. Mirio cut a seated bow. Wait a minute. The Space Hero 13 pushed their way to the front of the ring. You would deny the chance for a child to earn the mastery of their own quirk? That is an important part of a person's development as a human. A ripple of agreement spread throughout the heroes. You're right, 13. In most cases, that is an integral part of growing up. Izuku's voice had gone flat and cold, alarmingly swiftly. But there are some quirks that are simply too traumatic for a child to handle. They were the primary subjects of the quirk trading, you know? 4- and 5-year-olds who could not stand another day with their quirk. Such as one little girl that came to me. She likes bunnies and wants to be a hero. Do you know what her quirk did? It allowed her to turn inside out. The only course of profession that would have been open to her would have been as a living display for biologists to study organs and muscles. And the children around her were most certainly unready to see her viscera on a daily basis. Or how about a child 6 years old who acts and speaks like a man 3 times his age because his quirk caused him to see senseless death in his sleep? Optimistic doctors had labeled them prophetic dreams, but they weren't. I cross-referenced the events he saw and that I can now see when I sleep, and none ever came to pass. Regardless, this child was so inured to the thought and sight of death from his own quirk that he was one push away from suicidal. He had a breakdown when I implied that he would see even more death if he pursued his dream to be a doctor. So yes, I took their quirks and gave them ones that were so severely less traumatizing that they could walk calmly out of my office because a weight had been lifted off of their shoulders. And what about the quirkless? I don't hear any of you decrying migrating quirks to those without, because you all know that the quirkless cannot succeed in this world where even the most menial and entry-level jobs require a suitable quirk to be considered. Do any of you know the rate of quirkless people who have reached retirement? There was silence. Izuku could almost hear the heroes racking their memories for the statistics. Because I do. Izuku cut their thoughts off. 0%. This time the silence was shock. Izuku let it settle in. Not a single quirkless person has sustained a position as a thriving member of society past the age of 30 within the past 60 years. Most of them die early. All of their deaths stem from their inability to succeed in the face of prejudice against the quirkless in this age where they are the minority. They cannot get jobs and so cannot pay rent or buy food. They are relegated to the last given service at shelters and soup kitchens in favor of giving those with quirks a chance to regain their footing. And so they die of exposure, freezing, starvation. Some get killed by especially indiscriminate villains. Others take their own lives out of despair at the inability to amount to anything. Those that do not die resort to vigilantism and villainy to get what they need, and in response they are incarcerated, where they receive a roof over their head and 3 hot meals a day, something that they could not legally get for themselves. And all because nobody cares about the quirkless and their struggles. It even goes so far that when a quirkless person is in danger, has their very life on the line, nobody will step in to help. Izuku could almost hear Bagago flinching. But as soon as a person with a quirk has a hand laid on them, everyone comes up in arms. So yes, I steal from people the chance to struggle with the hardships they were born with to grow. And in its place, I leave hope for the future. I take the hopeless, the helpless, the castaways, and the ignored, and I give them hope. I give them the help that nobody can or will give them. I give them the means to earn their places in society, to make their voices heard. Some people have asked me as Midori why I do what I do, and I have always answered them truthfully. Izuku looked All Might in the eye. I just want to help people. Everyone. Especially those who no one else will. Izuku held All Might's gaze for a long moment of quiet.
The gaze was only broken because Mirio reached over and clapped a heavy hand on Izuku's shoulder, a watery grin on his face.
Now those are the ideals of a true hero,
Mirio sniffled, swiping his eyes with his free hand.
A wave of agreement and distraught queries ran through the collected heroes.
Well, after hearing your motivations and experiences, we'll have to justify making your trading venture public. Nezu sighed. Way to twist our collective arms, Midoriya. We'll have to spin news that you can give and take quirks away from all for one to keep the vigilantes from lynching you, of course. And I hope you don't mind, but we'll need to have heroes overseeing your business to deter funny business.
Izuku was stunned. He'd expected to be told to keep that part of his business quiet or stop altogether.
Hey, let me through, you fucks!
Bakugo grunted as he pushed his way through the crowd. Principal Nezu, if this goes public, there fucking needs to be a referral system for people who get registered quirkless, so they can get started on working with their damn quirks early.
Ah, yes. Excellent suggestion, Bakugo. Wasn't that how the villains inserted themselves into your life, Midoriya?
Nezu queried.
As a false program for Quirkless support.
Yes, it was. A referral system would have to be stringently monitored, as false imitators would definitely pop up as a new popular scam. And
Izuku turned to Bakugo, who had become flustered at the sudden attention.
because I know you don't know how to ask. Yes, Kachan, I forgive you. You're not the same person as you were 5 years ago.
Izuku beamed a bright smile at his childhood friend, who just looked away, muttering about stupid negos and their goddamn stupid cute smiles.
I still wouldn't kiss you, though.
I am curious, though, Midoriya.
All Might took Izuku's attention away from a spontaneously combusting Bakugo.
You showcased overwhelming strength, versatile use of your quirks, and a powerful intellect. Why had you not turned in the Villains Alliance before? Or simply destroyed them yourself, as you did nearly single-handedly today?
Well, that one's easy. Izuku grinned. If I'd done that from the get-go, then we wouldn't have had the opportunity to have this nice chat, would we? And I wouldn't have had the time to demonstrate my goodwill and ingratiate myself to you heroes so that I would not be mobbed on sight when I reveal myself. Plus, it just wouldn't have been as fun.
Graping little freak, Midnight muttered from the crowd.
Izuku realized that by all rights he should not have been able to hear Nemuri's utterance. His Super Sense quirk must have reactivated. On self-reflection, the quirk-suppressing drug was beginning to wear off. The lights behind the glass murals representing his quirks were beginning to glow, though the doors staunchly refused Izuku access to give and take still. Whoa! Mirio stood from his seat.
If everything has been worked out, we have a lot of preparation to do.
He gestured to Shigaraki, still out cold, to Himiko, bundled in restraints, and at the hotel full of snoring villains.
A lot of processing and paperwork.
I'll leave that to you all.
Izuku chuckled.
Well, leave us alone as well,
Nezu reminded.
If we are to sham a trial for Midoriya Izuku to appease the masses, we'll need a body to show them, and then you can return to excising the emotional traumas from our society.
Now known to many who used to know him, Midoriya Izuku is a master of the long con. He was taught by the best, after all. From the day he was registered as Quirkless, he had been seeing a tutor who had approached him, offering to teach him how to combat quirks without one of his own. It was a very short few years before Izuku's sensei knew that this quirkless wonder must be made a successor, for his analytical mind, his flexible thinking, and his utter devotion to whatever cause he picked up. So he began preparing the young boy to inherit his final power. He knew that his time was fast approaching his end, as both himself and his rival power began to stagnate under the weight of age. 5 years were spent by this sensei attempting to poison Izuku against heroes. He brought together the sprightly young man and the man-child Tomura Shigaraki, abandoned by heroes in society alike for his quirk. Sure enough, under Sensei's careful guidance, Izuku began taking on a more serious mind, acting aloof to heroes and their work. But it was all facade designed to insert himself into his Sensei's good graces. Sensei knew that his successor would not only be inheriting his work, but his business ventures he used to stay afloat as well,
And so Izuku began studying business instead of the heroics that he had pined for as a child and pursued in other lives in the multiverse. Additionally, he was put through an early starter's psychology course to receive accreditation, ostensibly so that he could take advantage of a hero's neurosis, but that Izuku bent towards a more altruistic end. Then came that fateful day. Sensei had revealed the nature of his quirk to Izuku, all for one. A quirk that let him take the quirks of others and hoard them to himself, or, alternatively, bestow them on others. And upon Midoriya Izuku did Sensei bestow all for one and all of the quirks he had stockpiled for decades, except for the quirks he needed to see, stay alive, and most importantly, put on a good show for his final showdown with the counterpart to his quirk. One for all. But he could not keep those last quirks to himself long before his protege came when he was left defenseless and stripped him of his last powers. Izuku took all for one, its stolen quirks, and Sensei's business ventures, and disappeared, leaving the villains' alliance headless and with barely enough metaphorical rope to hang themselves with. He only appeared publicly in a last stand against the heroes as an act of desperation that cost him his freedom. But this was not his story. Not really. No, this was the story of a small business that had opened up in a discreet shopping district in the middle of the city, left empty for some months as its proprietor attended to matters elsewhere. A small green-fronted store with a modest sign espousing its name and vocation fully and publicly. Midori's multitudinous quirk emporium. Consultations and trades. Quirkless welcome. The last refuge for the hopeless and lost, a second chance at life for the downtrodden and forgotten, where the last remnants of the age of quirklessness were wiped away, and where many future heroes found the wherewithal to be the absolute best that they could be.